Right, we are live. So happy Thursday, everybody. I hope the sun is shining where everyone is. It's not here, but we're still here. Today we've got Mr. Sam Vause on the call and the interview. Sam has kindly taken 20, 30 minutes out of his day to discuss his experience having worked with us in the 1%. Now, by all accounts, from my perspective, Sam's absolutely smashed it. I think he's had an amazing journey in where he's got to. But I want him to speak, not me, and he can talk to you more about how that all works. Before we jump into it, Sam, do you want to just introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I manage a logistics depot. So I essentially work in a warehouse um, at a level where I guess I'm a senior delivery station manager. So there's it's quite a big team. There's lots of kind of responsibilities, lots of accountabilities, and all that good stuff. Prior to that, my main career before I joined where I work now is I was in the army for best part of 9 years as an infantry officer. And I guess really enjoyed that process, really enjoyed the kind of work-life balance in that I kind of identify in retrospect. Didn't feel like that at the time, certainly not always. But actually looking back, I had quite a structure to my day and to my week, which kind of set in motion things like your kind of exercise and fitness regime is very much kind of directed to you, but it's very much part of your working day. And
Mm.
one of the challenges I found leaving that behind as I've moved into my current role and kind of progressed through the ladder in where I work now is that you've really got to make time for that. And you've got to fight for space for that. And I guess that's ultimately the fact that I didn't do that and didn't do that for a long time is what led me to the path which has ultimately caused me to reach out to you, Luke.
Cool. So and before I was going to say, let's rewind a couple of months. What was going on when you first reached out. Also, other point: busy dad, young kids, family, all the rest of it as well, right? There's all that going on. Is that fair?
Yeah, lots going on at home. Married to two young uns under four, so that's obviously another demand
Yep.
on my time, and one that's obviously very deserving of my time.
Cool. So let's rewind, like I say, a couple of months into the past. Probably just before you reached out to me and we decided to have a chat in terms of us doing a bit of work together. What was going on back then that made you decide to reach out? And also, I think you'd probably follow me for a little bit on social media as well, hadn't you? So yeah, just give us a bit of
Yeah,
context there.
yeah, okay. So I guess in terms of what was going on in from the work situation, same kind of responsibilities, really, same kind of accountabilities that I currently have. Um, I really struggled to set any kind of boundaries between that and what was going on at home. I didn't really have any I didn't have any clear sense of priorities as to what I wanted to kind of achieve beyond just my immediate work circle. And I guess the consequence of all of it was like, as someone who wants to do well at work and wants to do well at home, you kind of feel like, oh, I certainly perceived that I was failing at everything. I wasn't
Mhm.
really achieving anything. Never always feeling guilt as a parent when I was working, when I was at work and working late and early starts and stuff. And when I was spending too much time at work, then I'd feel guilty that I wasn't doing well as a parent. And throughout all of it, I guess the theme through both of those was that I wasn't really making any time really to be selfish and to prioritize what I wanted to do for me. Um, and I guess I probably was interpreting any time that I would have done to kind of prioritize myself or my own personal goals. I probably would have felt that that was actually quite selfish, and therefore I deprioritized. I didn't make time for it. I didn't have any kind of structures to manage it. And the net result of that, and when I reached out to yourself, Luke, it was after kind of 5 years of this, and I guess for the first year or two, there weren't any warning signs. There was nothing. Like, I just left the army. I was still pretty fit. I was in a position with kind of less responsibility. And then as responsibility kind of ramped up, and as my distance from like the army and the kind of routine rigor that I'd had as my kind of standard working day, as all of that started to gradually pile up, um, I quite quickly got to a place that, well, I say quite quickly, actually quite slowly, I incrementally got to a place over a number of years where I didn't really, I wouldn't really recognize myself as like
Mhm.
the Sam that left the army, um, kind of relatively young, ambitious, like pretty fit guy. I'd always been pretty fit in the army. I'd always trained pretty hard. It was something I took really personally. I was really proud of. Um, I increasingly didn't recognize that bloke when I looked in the mirror,
Mm-hmm.
and I found it a really harsh reflection. And yeah, I'd been following you for a number of years. I'd always thought that everything you'd written kind of makes sense, and it really, really resonated. But I guess I just didn't have. There's one thing to kind of look at something and appreciate it, but there's another thing to completely review like the way that you live your life
Yeah.
and kind of restructure the whole thing from the ground up. And I just didn't have, I guess, the motivation. I didn't make the time. I didn't do the things that I would have needed to do in order to actually fix it. So I kind of increasingly like viewed the problem almost as like an outside observer and would pretty much beat myself up about it routinely. And then I guess the thing which kind of led me to ultimately reach out and say, okay, I'm at the point where I probably do need some help here, is when it was one of your posts in particular that was about like comparing yourself in your 20s versus where you are now. And it was like, if you're not proud of like where you are versus where you were, like that's your decision. Like it's a direct result of all the things that you've done. It's a direct result of the choices you've made in terms of your lifestyle and everything else. And the only person really who's going to fix it is you. Like there's no cavalry coming over the hill that's going to come and save you, take away a load of responsibilities, suddenly like drop a couple of stone off your body so you can start like, being fit again. Like there's no silver bullet that's going to do all of that stuff. So if you want those outcomes, then you have to essentially drive the inputs, which is going to lead to that, and take accountability for it. And that was the thing for me that was like, okay, it's probably time where I actually need to commit.
I think that's a really good summary and an overview of where you're at, Sam. And I think I'm sure anyone's watching this, a lot of what you're describing, if they're in not the similar place to you, will resonate. And there's a few things there to pick out. One of them is that like slight dichotomy of, well, I'm at work and I'm trying to work really hard, but I'm feeling guilty because I'm not at home. And I'm at home and I'm feeling guilty because I'm not at work. And it's this like you can't win in either area. And then this kind of just cognitively aware, maybe you're not doing quite what you want to be doing, but slow, metastasize, is this a word? Metastasization of these behaviors. It doesn't happen overnight, but like you said, like a slow creep, and you get to a point like, what the fuck's happened? And then you get to a point where you don't really recognize yourself. And something I say here is none of that comes from a malintentioned place, right? You're not going, I want to fuck myself up and feel crap. Like you're doing it because actually you want to provide for your family, you want to be successful in the business, and you want to do that and kind of end up sacrificing those other things in order to make those the things that are important also happen. But you kind of lose yourself in the process. And you almost end up from a well-intentioned place driving yourself into the floor. But once you get to that point, it's like, well, I don't really have a roadmap or a way to work out of this. I'm conscious, and this is the other dichotomy. I'm consciously aware I need to do something, but I can't quite see the wood for the trees. I've got a whole ton more responsibilities now, and I still want to do those things. And like, yeah, I could just go, right, I'm gonna, quit all worldly pursuits and go and live in a cave, but that's just not going to fucking happen. I've got 2 kids, a business, the list goes on. And so it's like, what do we do? And I think that's the point at which we had the chat, and you reached out and put your hand up, and it's like, when I say this about you got to take personal responsibility, you are the result of your choices. It's true. It doesn't then mean that that's not hard and you don't understand what you need to do and you need help to achieve it. It's like those two things aren't mutually exclusive. They're both correct. It's just you have to recognize, no matter what, no matter whether it's me or another coach or someone else or just yourself, you are the one who has to address it. But sometimes when you're in it, you can't fucking see what you're meant to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And it certainly resonated with me. It was like I could see all the problems, I could see the symptoms. I knew where I wanted to be, but I just had no ability to join up the dots. And I find it really weird because like my routine at work, like I spend all day looking at data, like assigning timelines and like taking responsibility for stuff or assigning responsibility for stuff and like making plans with milestones that get us to where we want to be and all that stuff. And you do that day in, day out, but at no point had I ever stopped and thought, why don't I just apply that to myself?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and it's bonkers looking back. Like the fact that I spent so long thinking, like, you could just kind of plod along and you'd get
work
to,
itself out.
yeah, exactly. Without a plan, and it's bizarre, like especially like with my background, where like military planning is like everything, but for some reason I never stopped and thought about it in that way about myself.
And that's a hugely common one as well. Like the gents that I work with are typically doing pretty well from a career perspective, historically, and where they're at. And a lot of the rigor and what they do well and helps them achieve in one area, it's almost forgetting to apply that kind of level of rigor to yourself. There's a phrase that you used, Sam, and I love it, which is like, control the inputs to control the outputs, right? And it's like, well, in its most fundamental, that's ultimately what we're doing, right? Let's fast forward then to where we are, how we're sitting today. You've come through the process now. What have been your key achievements and successes having now come through the blueprint in the program, having worked together?
Yeah, I guess the key things for me, I'd probably like in terms of my work, it's no different. It's not like I'm doing fewer hours than I was before or anything like that. It's still as big a part of my life as it was. I've got much clearer boundaries though between like when I need to step in and when I don't. I've essentially like got better mechanisms when I'm at home for like how contactable I am. I mean, my role requires me to be contactable. And that's my choice, right? That I've chosen to do this job. But I kind of blank out other things, like cut out some of the noise, in particular in like relation to technology, which just allows me, I guess, to be more present in the limited windows that I do have with my family at home. And that's been really powerful. And I guess in terms of like the kind of nutrition side, like as someone who uses data all the time at work, I've kind of applied the same methodology to like what I'm eating, I guess, which has allowed me to ultimately, like, I suppose, get to the results I've got in terms of like having like fitness targets again. So, I mean, I've dropped like it's probably getting on for like over 2 stone now since I started this process, which has ultimately allowed me to train again in a way that I wanted to.
Yeah.
It's allowed me to like take up running again and set personal targets and ambitions that I just hadn't done since I was in the military, for what I want to achieve, and that has just given me so much of a sense of satisfaction. And I guess that it almost then becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you feel better about yourself, so you want to, I guess, you get a bit of a high, right, and you want to kind of challenge yourself again and kind of do better and keep striving for more, which has been really good for me. So that's all been massive. And then I guess it's just the second order effects of doing all of those things that just like I suppose I just feel stressed to a much less degree than I certainly used to when I was at home. Previously, I'd kind of get home from work and I'd always just feel like I was still there. I'd be like putting the kids to bed and just feeling my phone like vibrating in my pocket and just thinking like, I'm gonna have whatever that is, I'm gonna have to go deal with that.
Yeah.
And it would completely detract from how present I was at that moment in time. And then I feel bad for that, because I'll be like, this is the only half hour I've got with like my oldest as I'm putting him to bed, and I'm distracted by work. So all of those things have like just given me much more sense of control over what I'm doing, and allowed me to actually focus on when I'm at home, I'm kind of being more of a family man, I'm being a dad, or I'm doing stuff for me. I'm doing whatever training plan I've got for that particular day. And I'll hit that. And like sometimes life gets in the way, right? Like I'll have a plan and it won't always materialize in the way I've planned. And whereas in the past I would have said like, oh well, I guess I'll just beat myself up, and then if I can't do like the 10K that I planned to do, or if I can't do that workout that I planned, then I'll just chin it off and maybe I'll just drink a bottle of wine instead as a coping mechanism. And increasingly now I'm just like, well, okay, moderate what you said you were trying to do. You still do the exercise, but if you can't do this, then you can do that. You can always do something. Yeah, so I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying like it's been a pretty holistic deliverables across everything from like how I approach work life, how I approach what I eat, and then how I approach like how I move and what I do with my body, I guess. And the end result of it is that obviously it could be, because it's so holistic, you end up feeling much better overall.
Something you said there is the that what can I do, right? And something I talk about on social media, or have talked about on social media, is things like having non-negotiables and having discipline and these things. And I think sometimes it can be misconstrued as to what that actually means, right? Because like you could say discipline is right, I'm going to commit to doing this one thing, that's it, right? And part of it is that, right? But the non-negotiable discipline, like I will move my body this morning. That is my discipline thing. And no matter what, aside from being super ill or something, or life has literally gone, you can't because your kids are sick and you got to do something, no matter what, I'll do the thing. But then life has dictated that you don't have the time to do the thing you had planned. So therefore, it's not possible. I don't have time. No. The way the discipline kicks in and goes, and this is what you sort of said there around the resilience about what can I do? Right, I'm going to do a 10K this morning. Oh, I ain't got time to do a 10K. Right. Actually, we've got to do time to do a 5K. No. Okay, I ain't even got 20 minutes. Okay, could I just do 20 push-ups? Yep, there we go. Done. Tick. Now we're just using one specific example around exercise here. For me, that filters across the board, across all things, being present, being focused, whatever those habits, behaviors, things you do or don't want to do. But I think having that headspace is much more empowering, because then you can keep those commitments to yourself and you can do the things that you say you're going to do. And that feels good. Now, is that the exact thing you want to do? No, of course it's not. You want to do your 10K, but sometimes you can't. And it doesn't mean, oh, well, therefore the world said this, therefore woe is me. No. We can always do something. I think starting to breed that way of thinking and operating within your life, like you said, the control piece, I think it's just a much more empowered way to behave.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess, and one of the fundamental things, which I guess has actually like moved into how I feel about situations at work as well as everything else, is like just kind of pushing away the victim mentality, which I'd probably allowed myself to fall into. I'd kind of blame like, oh, work's like all consuming, therefore I can't achieve this and I can't do that. And like taking more control of the inputs, going back to, what you were talking about earlier, taking more control of the inputs actually, and I guess gives you a sense of overall agency for what's going on in the kind of wider picture of your life.
Yeah.
And just I've certainly felt significantly more empowered as a result of it all, just because like I'm not going to let one thing ruin that's only actually impacted one aspect of my life. I'm not going to ruin it. I'm not going to allow it to kind of ruin it, other things, or kind of overspill into how I act at home and stuff like that. And it's not to say that's an easy thing to do, right? Of course,
No.
it's a difficult thing to do. Like what happens at work is sometimes stressful and demanding, as it is for everyone. But I guess it's just about like going through those like conscious steps of, okay, do I want to allow this to impact like my relationships at home? Do I want to allow it to impact anything else? No. Then therefore, what are you going to do about it? What mechanisms you need to put in place to give you some sort of sense of like separation, and I guess like keeping it in its box to a degree.
Yeah. And I think this is where you used to use the word holistic before about how we look at things. And this is where I think that's so important, because for me, there's not one magic panacea in these areas that's going to fix it. So I talk about work-life balance. It doesn't really exist, really. I think it's more like work-life compromise, but in the right way, right? But like, there isn't some one shiny hack that's going to achieve that. It's like, well, how can you achieve work-life balance? Well, maybe part of that is ensuring you're present when you're at home, when you're able to park work. Well, how can you do that? It's going to be pretty hard if you've done no exercise, you roll out of bed at half 8 with a hangover, you race around with the kids, then you have a difficult conversation which you're not able to process at work. Do you think you're going to be very present in the evening? No. Well, how do we achieve that then? Well, maybe get up a bit earlier, go to bed at a reasonable time, don't drink the bottle of wine, turn your phone off so you can be focused and have some quality time with your missus. So then when you're at work, your head's a bit clearer. So that thing that colleague's just done that normally you'd tell them to fuck off, you're able to stop, take a breath and actually think about it logically. All of that, there's so many influencing parts to how that happens. And that's why it's not, do some burpees in the morning, right? That can help, but it's not the only thing. Or it's not just put your phone down or just meditate. There's a multitude of factors that influence that. And I think if you can consistently have a lot of that bubbling over in the background, it allows you to, in the moment, put your phone down and be present. Have that rational conversation. Don't let your head run movies about what's happening at work. But I think it's the sum of the parts versus one magic piece.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I guess for me, like going back to work-life balance thing, I think it's more like work-life rhythm as opposed to work-life balance. Like there's still going to be days and weeks where like I'll have to do more at work or I will want to do more at home. The idea of having like a day that's perfectly balanced between all the different constituent parts that you want is, I don't think that's necessarily realistic, certainly not in my line of work. But having a work-life rhythm where you can accept, okay, right now, this is a week where I need to compromise on X, Y, and Z because of this particular thing. But then the following week, I'm going to plan to like rebalance that by doing these other things, and just kind of, you roll with the rhythms, I guess, to a degree. And sometimes I still struggle with the fact that like it will largely be work that dictates those other things, but that's just what you got to do, right? For me, that my interpretation of it is like that's what I've chosen to do in order to provide for my family, in order to give us the lifestyle that we want to have.
And therefore, what we're talking about here is you getting the most out of yourself within that and doing the best you can within that. There is always going to be an element of compromise. Like we might all like to just kick our heels, go off and do all the exercise we want to do, and just get paid for the privilege, and then spend all your time with kids. That'd be great. That's not life. And so it's like, but you can sort of run through life resenting that it's not that, and then hating everything. But what does that achieve? It's like, no, this is the reality. Well, let's get the fucking best out of what I've got right now. And for me, that's what I believe we're talking about here. I know you're a busy man and you're at work as well, Sam, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. A couple more questions for you, because I think this has been really helpful so far. What would you say has been your main takeaway or takeaways from having come through this whole process now?
I think it's probably just having a plan, like having a plan and then holding yourself to it. We say now as in the military, like the plan is worth nothing, but planning is worth everything. And I think that's like absolutely resonant with all this process, because you will have a plan and it will have to flex, it will have to change. But the fact that you've gone through the process of figuring out what you want to do in each different aspect of your life and how you're going to get there means that you can be dynamic and you can flex to like life, right? When something gets in the way.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I'm really glad that that's what's come through, because that's also what I'm really passionate about. It's because, yeah, there's all these cool things you can do to make you feel good, show up better, and have a structure and routine in mornings and all this great stuff, and that's all great. But then life just does this constantly. It's like, well, what? And then it rolling. Well, what we're going to do? And it's having that flexibility. And mate, you're an amazing example of that, because it wasn't really the driving force, but it was a factor. You've lost a good couple of stones, so you're physically in an awesome position, which is great. But I think more importantly, you've got that mojo back. You're back to, or you rekindled what was lost for a little bit, right? And you're back in business, and that's great. And like I say to everyone, that's all down to you. Yes, we went through a process together and helped, and you were in a group, and you were really engaged within the group, and I think that really helped as well. But ultimately, you're the one who's done the work, and the net result is you're the sum product of that today. It's awesome to see, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's not done, of course. Like it's
it's always work in progress, never stops.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I mean, certainly for me, it's been, I don't use the phrase life changing lightly, but it has been.
Awesome. Well, mate, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Before we get off, let's say someone's watching this, maybe in a position like you were a couple of months back, not feeling the best, kind of, know they want to do something but not quite sure what to do. They're aware of it, that dichotomy we discussed, but they're on the fence about reaching out to somebody like me or anyone like that. What would you say to someone who was in your shoes a couple of months back?
I'd probably say, like, stop, figure out, take some time to actually plan where you want to be. And if you're unable at that point to break that down into like bite-sized chunks as to how you're going to get there, then you don't really have a plan. You've just got like a goal which you'll never achieve, and therefore you'll just get increasingly frustrated the longer that it remains the status quo. So if you don't know how to join the dots and you want to, then like reach out and potentially get some help with how to do that, and with someone who is going to give you some mechanisms which will be like self-sustaining, so you can then go off and kind of manage it yourself thereafter, which I guess, or at least I hope, is where I'm at currently.
Yeah. Well, like we said, you're a few months out of the process. We were just saying that before we jumped on the call, and you're boshing it. You're going to run a marathon tomorrow. Is that right? Is that what you told me? Is that
that's my plan? Yeah.
just casually, just for anyone watching this, Sam just was like, "Oh yeah, mate, we can do a call Thursday, not Friday, though, because I'm running a marathon." I was like, "Oh, all right then, fine." So case in point. On that note, thank you, Sam. Really appreciate your time. Hopefully, anyone watching has got a lot out of this. I know I have, and it's you're an inspiration to see, mate. And I don't say it lightly either. It's been great to see you take ownership of yourself and you're the result of where you are today. So thank you. If anyone's watching this and they are interested in having a chat, would like to see about how I could help, drop me a note in the comments or send me a DM. Otherwise, have a fantastic week, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate, and thank you. Take care.
Cheers, Luke. Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.